I don't know what the hell I'm doing. All right, so I got a beer. I didn't even know if you were gonna go beer with it, but I went beer.
Hey, no judgment. I thought I'd be drinking alone today because you say you only drink like one beer a week.
Yeah, but I didn't start. Is that a Tampa Bay hat? What kind of hat is that? Oh, that's just pretty fire. That's flame.
You don't know what that is?
Nah.
That's Albuquerque Dukes, baby.
Oh, I thought it was wasn't it the Isotopes?
Well, now they're the Isotopes. You know the story behind that, right?
No.
So they were the Albuquerque Dukes all through my childhood and whatnot. And in the 90s, the Simpsons had an episode where whatever they have a baseball team called the Isotopes in the Simpsons. And one of the lines in there is like how the team is moving to Albuquerque. And so it became like a running joke. And for marketing purposes, the minor league team was like, yo, we should change our name to the Isotopes. And it's crazy because they're caking off of branding now. Just off
right, because people just want to cop the Isotope shit because of Simpsons.
Yep, straight up. You drinking the same joint as last night?
Mm-mm. I'm drinking what's known as the Subject 21.
Same brewery, Civil Service, Civil
Society. Absolutely.
Civil Service.
Civil Service. I'm just trying to be a civil servant out here, you know? It ain't easy.
Yo, in a way, times like this, this is the type of shit that drives you to government jobs. You're sitting there being like, well, shit, if I had a government job, I'd still be getting that paycheck.
Right? I mean, I would love that right now. All right, perfect. So we are here. That's what the F happened. Welcome to the podcast.
What the
I'm Ali, one of the hosts, and that's my homeboy, Clayton. So, hey, I like what you got in the background. Is that like a Barnum, like a circus tent or something?
That's my daughter's circus tent. It's a metaphor for life right now.
Right, I was gonna say it's a metaphor for planet Earth. There's this guy named Heraclitus, and he was a philosopher, and he said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." So what I was talking with Clayton about was how the river is kind of a metaphor for the macrocosm of the world, which is constantly changing, just like the river, and the man is the microcosm for us ourselves, because we're constantly changing. And what we're seeing is these days people are on the stay-at-home orders, they're on the social distancing, and we can see that a lot of things are changing. So we just kind of wanted to talk about how the world is changing and also how we see people are changing. All right, so Clayton, what do you think about the social distancing and
the full extent and gravity of this virus and the threat that it potentially is, when you've got the people that are ramming it down your throat, telling you it's terrible and saying, hey, stay home, keep your distance, are also those that benefit greatly from keeping you home. But also you were talking about change before, and that very resonant line from I'll butcher the name, bro. Can you repeat it one more time?
Heraclitus, I think.
Heraclitus.
I mean, I feel like I'm butchering the name.
No, I'm gonna have to look it up again here in a second. But the river is life, right? And man is mankind. So this life we have, that river, it's flowing, it's constant. It is under constant change. And we as human beings are under constant change. We're not the same person we were a year ago, 2 years ago. we move, we change jobs, change relationships. We have ups and downs. It's a fact of life, and it's obvious that many people encourage us to embrace that. It's an old refrain to embrace change, and that's I think an important consideration today, because so much is changing right before our eyes and very quickly. Some of it to our agreement. I mean, as you mentioned, social distancing, for example, being quarantined in our home, people are handling it in different ways. Some people are like, "Hey, I'm with this. You know, I'll hang out at home. I don't want to go to work. If I keep getting paid, cool. I can interact with my friends online easily, and family members. So you're not you don't feel like you're necessarily missing much or skipping a beat. Other people are going stir crazy, having their shining moment.
Here's Johnny.
I'm sure there's a few people starting to get that cabin fever already, and I mean, especially I'm hearing people that they don't even leave their houses right now. So this has to be tremendously maddening for them. But
maddening and like making them mad, or also just making them go mad.
Yep. It's a combination of both.
All right, so I just wanted to go on to another article that we found where it says police in California have already announced a plan to use drones equipped with cameras and loudspeakers to enforce the recently imposed quarantine orders. Spencer Gore, the chief executive of Impossible Aerospace, a California-based maker of high-performance drones used by first responders, admitted that the idea seems a little Orwellian, but insisted that it could save lives. What we saw in China and what we're probably going to see around the world is using drones with cameras and loudspeakers to fly around to see if people are gathering where they shouldn't be and telling them to go home, Gore said. So I think in China and also in Spain, these drones would fly over groups of people and they have loudspeakers that would just like yell at them to be like, go home, go home. So,
well, what's funny is that
change.
Well, it's funny because like I was in the Dominican Republic in a place called Nahua, which is this isn't touristy Dominican Republic, and I'm hanging there with my boys, and they had a curfew, and the cops are driving around this town square being like, curfew's in effect, get your asses home. So, you know, in effect, this isn't a new practice in other places, but, you know, it's like in a place like Dominican Republic where, you know, the citizens' rights aren't on the at least perceived level that we have here. So there's that, and you got me chuckling a little bit because the segue from talking Amazon, who has fantasized using drones for home delivery, and he's like, now cops are using them to yell at people. They should have come here to New York, by the way, and yelled at all the cats playing ball in the park. Like, oh.
Right. But exactly. But then I guess like on a microcosmic level, I mean, people are already so used to not having privacy. People used to really cherish their right to privacy, but with social media, now we know that the NSA is like watching us through the little cameras on our computers from Snowden and all these things. People are so used to giving up their privacy. I mean, what do you think about how that's going to play itself out when you're just walking through the streets and there's a drone flying over you and like cops are filming you? They're actually maybe telling you to stop, empty your pockets. Like, how far does this go?
In Colorado a few years ago, I recall like a rancher or someone, some nerd probably or someone was flying a drone, fucking around, fly over his ranch, and the motherfucker just said, "Bow, bust that shit out of the sky." And it was like, dude, you shot my drone. He's like, you found that shit over my property. I don't play that shit. And I think
Little skeet.
I think we're in an interesting moment on that because, especially because you got a lot of this social shaming, especially through social media, where it's like stay the fuck home and this and that. And there are people resistant to that, and I think you're going to find new forms of resistance emerging and popping up as a result of this. You're seeing a little bit of it already, where people seem to be drawing the battle lines in terms of how much they buy into coronavirus as an existential threat, and it's gotten political, especially since Trump is taking a lot of flack for it. He's been noticeably dismissive of it, and so a lot of his supporters and people that one are distrustful of government already, distrustful of Democrats who are, as you said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. For Democrats, this is a perfect opportunity to just shit on him. So
Tell you that you have to go home, you can't work. So then you're like, well, you told me I can't work. What are you going to do about it?
and you're like, well, I sure.
You're like, oh, $1,200.
And you're like,
$1,200 for you.
I sure wish I had a government job when this gets over, so that I could still work from home and get paid and be part of the bureaucracy. So it just forces you to the tit almost, and so
the universal basic income, which is interesting. I mean, I didn't have any articles that were about universal basic income, but this seems like a perfect time to segue into universal basic income, because it seems like the longer we're on this stay-home order, the closer and closer we're going to come to universal basic income, which the World Economic Forum has been talking about for quite some time at their Davos conference. And I've always said that people are not going to willingly go to universal basic income because we're so accustomed to disposable income. Nobody wants to go from from disposable income to basic income. Well, people like their vacations. They like to buy their Nikes. They like their Apple products. They like to show off on Instagram, to flex on people. But you go to universal basic income, it's going to be like one set of clothes. You don't own those clothes. The government's loaning those clothes to you. You live in a place, you don't own that place. The government's loaning that place to you. And that's kind of what the World Economic Forum kept speaking about, was that private property and individual ownership is kind of a thing of the past. People don't need to own things. They just need the use of things. You don't need to own a cell phone. You just need the ability to use a cell phone.
Well, again, I think we got to be clear here. What's happening is, I think everything you're describing is right, but it's for certain people. And I think specifically it's like the middle class. Like the idea of ownership runs very strong for the richest and the wealthiest. They own things, but it's also things that they can, they can exchange readily, and their wealth remains the same. Like that, I just think it's on a different level. I mean, think about the things that our parents, many of us being in the middle class at best, have. It's home ownership, which was like a hallmark. That pension or retirement, things like that. And as that saying goes, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Like for the wealthiest, to have a valuable house or property, things of that nature, those are things that get passed down from generation to generation. It remains. How many middle class people hang on to their property? They sell that shit and move somewhere else and retire, just because they're fucking done with work, right? So home ownership is not being passed generationally. Wealth is not being passed generationally. I think there's a lot of middle class people whose kids are already worse off. Me and in that, and I believe you probably would fall in
Yep.
that same category. You know,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
worse off. So it's not like, where previous, you're building off of previous generations and moving upward. That concept of upward mobility, that's pretty much a farce at this point.
What people make in raises is not even keeping up with inflation. So people are actually each year getting poorer and poorer and poorer. But the fact of the matter is, people are going into more and more debt. So it seems like they have more and more things, but actually they're just poorer and poorer. Well, and that's kind of what the river is doing. And people, the microcosmic, which is people, are just adapting to that. People are accepting that they're not going to be able to retire. They don't have any retirement. Yeah. People are just accepting that that's what this river is doing, and that's the change. So
in the same
as opposed to adapting to it so you can still have the things that these prior generations once had, the adaptation is, hey, this is just how it is now.
Well, and again, part of that is because we've seen our parents give stuff up. What about eminent domain? The government just snatches your shit up and takes it, says we need to develop something, whatever. So like, that doesn't happen to the 1%, like the land barons, the rich of the rich. They're not pulling eminent domain on their properties or places. It is people in the middle class who has some. So things that are considered hallmarks sacred for America, it's like liberty and justice for all. It's a nice mantra, but there are people it does apply to, and for the rest of us, it's like it's a feel-good slogan.
Read this next thing. It's kind of one of the last articles that I had. I had some other articles, but since we're kind of running through our time, all right, because this affects both our states, which me in Florida and up there in New York. In Florida, state police are setting up checkpoints on Interstate 10 looking for Louisiana residents trying to enter the state. In Rhode Island, police are stopping vehicles with New York State license plates, and the National Guard is going door to door looking for New York City residents.
Starting today, the Rhode Island National Guard is going door to door in coastal communities looking for people who recently traveled from New York State, which now has more than 50,000 confirmed cases.
The New York City Metropolitan Transportation Authority has recently issued quote unquote travel papers to all of their employees. So it kind of looks like there's going to be these checkpoints. If you want to be out of your house in New York, you got to have papers that say that you're allowed to be outside of your house. Rhode Island, they're going door to door looking for people from New York City as if they are fugitives from the law.
Doesn't that sound like the Gestapo in Nazi Germany or some shit?
It sounds pretty crazy, but this is the river that we are in. So I just wonder how people are adapting to it. Is this something that majority of the people think is necessary, that people accept? I'm actually I'm a little bit surprised at how easily everyone just accepts this as this is what's necessary.
But that goes back to that was probably exactly how the people in Germany responded to current events at that time. It was just like, this is what's necessary, and you're right, and don't question. I mean, this is not the time to get smart and think that you know better than the government and whatnot. It's like, stay the fuck home, or whatever, whatever the equivalent message would be, right? And the thing is, it's
well, my question is also, if they're coming to your house, knocking on doors to check if people from New York City are there, do they not need a warrant? Can you just refuse the search? Because I tell people,
you should be greeting those
I do not consent to a search.
The British were doing that in the lead up to the Revolutionary War. Hey, we're gonna roll up your crib. They were taking over homes. They had that quartering act or something along those lines where you just could you know, actually, I think that was during the Revolutionary War, but, you know, you just could take over someone's home for the purpose of the war and whatnot. And these are the type of behaviors that lead to, well, there's two ways that you could treat it. You can treat it passively and say, it's for the best, it's for our best. It's, you know, they're keeping us safe and whatnot. Or
Big brother knows best.
I don't think there's a historical precedence that suggests that our government knows best or is looking out for our best interest. I mean,
well, I would say the precedence is that they're not looking out for our best interest. And the fact that people just assume that the government and the people in the government have their best interest in mind is a bit outlandish and outrageous based on how often the American people have been lied to by the government to think, well, you know, now everything they're saying is true and they're here to protect us. But I mean, I don't want to say you rarely see people questioning, because I do see people out there questioning, but the vast majority of folks think that these things are necessary. So what we're going into as this river changes, I think that many people are waiting for the river to kind of flow backwards and go back to where it once was. But really what happens with the river is it just keeps going downstream. So where that river once was, it's not going to go back to where it was. It's just going to keep moving forward. So every liberty that people give away, they're not going to get it back. You know, every right that people give away, they're not going to get it back. Every privacy that they give up to the government for the sake of public safety or whatever it is, it's not coming back. But I constantly hear people talking about, well, when things get back to normal, But I think it's like Wes Watson was saying, can you do 10 years like this? What if this is the new normal?
Yeah.
It's almost like most people are not considering that this could be the new normal. All right, so maybe eventually the coronavirus dies down and it's no longer as much of a health risk or health threat. But the checkpoints, the drones, the rights to privacy,
there's also
the idea that you can be quarantined and pushed towards closer to universal basic income. These things are not going to go back, and these are things that a lot of people don't realize have been discussed ad nauseum for years. And when you know that these type of things have been talked about by the people that are in power, the powers that be, over several years, and then you see it all happening, all of a sudden you start thinking, well, wow, this was a great pretext for that to happen. Now, was it a pretext? I don't know. But when you've talked about these things over and over again, and now they're being able to be implemented because of something, it's hard to separate the two when you know that that's what the overall plan has been, and now we're getting pushed towards the plan. And that's not saying that what's going on is not real. People aren't getting sick, or because yes, people are getting sick for sure. Like my buddy, just like, he got sick. We don't know what he's got, but he said he's feeling under the weather. But at the same time,
the hospital wants to.
Is it necessary to give up our freedoms over this? Because that's what's happening. And what people have to understand is once you give up a freedom, you're not getting it back.
Yeah. Are people going to be rushing back to movie theaters, to malls,
hotels?
I mean, shit.
Casinos.
Casinos, absolutely. And
Sports games. What about going to the game?
I think sports will come back because, think about post 9/11, the terrorist threat, that constant people, people. If I were a terrorist, that would be like where I'd fucking want to go bomb some shit because a bunch of people are congregating. You think that scared anybody away from going to sports games? People were back there like within days of 9/11 and whatnot. It's just like sports. Sports brings out a different breed of people, man. Like people will do it. People will start.
Everyone will just be wearing a mask.
Well, that's the thing too, man. Is like, if the powers that be have a reason to worry, it's because you have a bunch of restless masses right now
that don't have their sports. They don't have their games.
Yep.
They don't have their games.
We have all this online shit. I know people like we're playing poker all day, and then now my boys are like, "Yo, you play Madden 20 or whatever," and that's the fascinating thing is that it almost makes you wonder. They were like, "Well, we have to make sure there's enough virtual entertainment for these motherfuckers before we completely wall them in and
because people are gonna go nuts without their sports and entertainment."
Well,
any last words on change?
I just gotta say again, I threw this out there to you earlier today. A little Nas quote because I feel like we gotta do our best to incorporate a lot of music and movies and references because that's how you keep these things fresh and fun, and it resonates with me. It should resonate with people, but he's got a song called Deja Vu, which I think we should tack on at the end. But Deja Vu is it's like a whole new beginning. And it's just a simple line, but it's one of those things. Deja vu, same thing. It's a simple two. I don't know if you would consider that 2 words or whatever it is, but deja vu, we understand what that is, and that's life. It's deja vu. We've seen this before. We've been here before. We're gonna get through it, and that change. You're gonna get through it. You gotta rock with it. Find the ways to exploit it. And if you think about it, like it's a whole new beginning. That's a good way to start. Like, hey, I'm fresh. I ain't got no chains on me, no fetters, nothing of that sort. I just this is day one, and there's no one to judge me. And that's part of it too. Is like when you feel that you're at an age where your confidence is such that you're not even concerned about something like that. So there's something to be said if you're of a certain age where, a lot of things you might have been worried about in the past, you kind of shrug off. That's a boon to your creativity, to your output, to your what you're willing to do. So that's what I'll leave it with. How about you?
I think I said everything that I could say about change. I just want to say thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched this thing to the very end. This is our first podcast / video for That's What the F Happened. I'm Ali. I'm with my homeboy Clayton. We were just talking about the Heraclitus statement that no man steps in the same river twice, because the river changes and so does the man. So we've been talking about change, how the world's changing, and how we can change to adapt to the new world. So again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back at you with another one of these in the future.
By the way,
that's what the F happens.
I think it's Heraclitus. That's my guess. Heraclitus or Heraclitus, one of the two. But
we'll figure it out. We butchered the name, but the point is,
we should do some.
We don't step in the same river twice, and we don't try to swim upstream. We go with the flow. We ride the wave.
Because that's what the F happens.
Because that's what the F happens.
Exactly.
Thanks for tuning in.